Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me again. And joining me this time from his home in Israel is my friend, Ambassador Danny Ayalon. And I'll tell you a little bit about Danny, and then we'll just meet uh, through this magic of Zoom, as we have had to do with all my friends because of this unfortunate pandemic time we're all going through. Uh, Danny, uh, or Daniel, but it's Danny Ayalon,
Mark,
is,
it is a great pleasure to be here with you.
thank
You
you.
know that you're an icon, you are a global star, but in Israel, you are really a hero. And we all miss you because I know the corona kept you away
And
from
is,
our homeland.
and is still keeping me away. I should have been there already like 2 months ago. Next month in August, we are now in July, the second season of my hot TV series
Oh,
that I am co-starring in, Judah, is
mm,
going to start streaming in Israel, and I was supposed to be there, but maybe, God willing, maybe it'll happen. Let me just give you a little bit of a very brief introduction to Danny. He is a diplomat, a columnist, a politician. He served as deputy foreign minister, as a member of the Knesset. He was Israel's ambassador to the United States from 2002 to 2006. That's where we first met. He previously worked as senior foreign policy advisor to Prime Ministers Ariel Sharon, Ehud Barak, Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, the list of his accomplishments in his service to Israel is so long that we don't have enough time to go through it all. But uh, I met Danny, Tziona, my wife, and I first met Danny when he was uh, Israel's ambassador in Washington. And he and his wife, Anne, were kind enough to invite us to stay with them twice, 2 years in a row. I emceed the Israel Independence Day celebrations in Washington. Danny, remember? Uh,
absolutely. I was going to mention it. Had you forgotten? Absolutely.
how could I
That
forget you? You let us stay in it. Was it the Shimon Peres room, or what was which?
right.
Was it that the bedroom?
It was the Golda Meir's room. Yeah.
Well, I actually we slept in Golda Meir's bed. That was a great honor. And I remember that I think it was the first or the second Yom Ha'atzmaut. The guest of honor was Colin Powell.
Right. Exactly.
I have a
Yeah.
picture that I'm going to put up of that, and that's when I found out that Colin Powell spoke Yiddish.
Yeah.
He was the Shabbos goy in his neighborhood. He used to go and turn on the lights on the Sabbath, I think in the synagogue, I don't know, but it was a delightful thing. And thank you for joining me, Danny. How are you guys doing? We are in the middle, here in the States. They say we're still in the first phase, but I understand Israel is now shutting down again for the
Yes.
second.
It seems like it's just running out of control. We have fared very well throughout the first wave, but I think now most experts say that we failed on getting back to normal, and it was too quick, not gradual, and too wide. They opened schools right away, and I think this was the main source of this, you know, spreading of the virus. And now it's really, really bad. So they're thinking of shutting again. I don't think they will do a total, lock, because this is really bad for the economy. And there are many, many who are just reeling out of the crisis before. But some are going to suffer anyway. All those in the hospitality business, restaurants. It's just really pitiful, and it's just painful to see that. But also, Mike, in your profession, we have all the artists here,
I
which
know.
are also are they are really crying, And it's not just them. It's, it's all the auxiliary, the sound man and the recorders and everyone else. So it's really bad. And so far we have not seen a clear path out. We have a two-headed government, as you know, Mike, and each one pulls their own way, and until they get their act together, I think we will continue to see what we do see. Anne and I are okay. We are mostly at home, and for work we use Zoom like we do now. But we're trying not to get out if we don't need to. Although this morning, this is evening time in Israel. This morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, 6:30, we went to the beach. It was beautiful.
You went to the beach?
The Mediterranean was calling. Yes, it was beautiful.
I know it is so difficult and so frustrating not to be able to do the basic, enjoyments that we always used to do on a Shabbat, on a weekend. The beach is so close to where you live. I mean, it's and my greatest frustration is not being able to hug my grandkids. That's, I see them from afar. We do Zoom, Shabbat Zooms, but it's just not the same. How are the girls doing? Are they home with you, or are they out?
Yes, we're lucky they're home. Zohar, which you remember, is now 27. She works in a high-tech company. This is Israel, the startup nation.
Right.
And during the first wave, they all worked from home. Then they went back to work. But as of Monday, they will go back to working from home. So, but she's fine because she can work from wherever she is. And Abigail, who is 22, is at the IDC, the interdisciplinarian center in Herzliya, and she takes she's just finishing the first year in psychology and law.
When did they grow up so fast? I mean,
I'll tell you,
what's happened? 22. I remember. Wow. So about when we first met, it was about 18 years ago.
Yeah. And she
was 4 years old.
And she was a paratrooper in the military. She just got out of the army about a year and a half ago. And we went to see her jumping from the plane. And she was the first one to jump. They put the girls first, so the boys have no choice but to jump after that.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Zoe, she's been like 5-6 years out of the army, but she's been a sharpshooter in the army. So they both had very fulfilling service, that they felt that they were really doing something, contributing.
And was Anne able to sleep at nights?
Not very well, but she was very proud.
Well, we were talking about diplomacy. You having been serving for tell us a little bit about your personal background. I never asked you, were you born in Israel?
Yes, I was born in downtown Tel Aviv. You would know it's Maza Street by Rothschild and Schenkin, right where now it's right Yapi area. During my time, it was just kind of a middle class kind of gray area.
Sorry, Danny, that's interesting because Tiona, my wife, was born at Beit Cholim Wolfson Hospital, wow. Which was in the same area. In that same area.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. This was considered like at that time it was almost south. I mean, it's now center Tel Aviv,
right?
And very, very, I would say, normal upbringing, and I enjoyed myself very much. I never felt that I was missing anything. I was 12 years old during the 6 Days War, 1967. And I recall that very vividly because we were called to fill sandbags and to tape glasses with masking tape and all that. And I remember one thing, every now and then we had to listen to the Kol Haram Mikahir, the Ram voice of Cairo.
In Hebrew.
And
yes.
Yes, they told us they're going to throw all the Jews into the sea. And I remember, I didn't tell anybody because I was ashamed, but I kept a bathing suit. You know, when I went to bed, I kept a bathing suit under my bed, thinking, well, if they're going to throw us to the sea, you know, so I'll be able to swim with my bathing suit. So
Oh,
I
oh,
remember that from 67. Can you believe it?
oh, Danny, that is look what a young person's thoughts are under
Yeah.
those circumstances. I was at the time in down with the army down in Rafiach and El Arish. I joined when the war broke out. Aluf Tal, General Tal's brigade, and entertained basically every night. We would entertain. We would catch up with the fighting, and a friend of mine, Benny Behrman, who was a entertainer.
Oh, sure.
He and I, yeah, we commissioned a Russian Jeep, and that we had gotten as shalal, and we drove and followed the fighting. And my most memorable moment was when we liberated Jerusalem, and we were in the Gaza Strip. It was at night, and we were listening at every hour. We all had these little transistor radios, and every hour we would listen to the radio, to the news. And we were about to perform for a group of soldiers. They would bring jeeps and turn on the headlights and light us up, and we would stand there in the middle of the desert and perform. But we turned on the radio, and we heard, you always used to hear that, you still do, beep, beep, beep,
Yeah,
beep.
yeah.
Kan Kol
Right.
Israel Mirushalayim. This is the voice of Israel broadcasting from Jerusalem. And then we heard a shofar blowing, and Rabbi Goren, the chief rabbi of the Israeli Defense Forces, had just arrived at the Western Wall. He blew the shofar, and he cried out, Shechianu v'kimanu v'gianu lazman hazeh. We have arrived at this moment. And everybody started singing Jerusalem of Gold. I get the shivers when I think of it. We were standing there in the middle of the desert, and here, listening to the singing of Jerusalem of Gold at the Western Wall. We started singing it, and it's a moment I will never, ever forget as long as I live. It's right in my memory. So,
Now, Mark, that was after your classic, the Shnei Kuni Lemon.
yes, Kuni Lemel was released July 1st on my birthday, 1966. And
That was the
then
first one. Yeah.
that was the first one. And everybody in Israel knew me from Kuni Lemel. It was a year later, and it was the biggest, the first Israeli film in Technicolor, a musical, a cinemascope, and I played this character. There was no television at the time in Israel, so everybody knew me as Kuni Lemel. And those were, it was a year later. The war broke out June 5th, 67, and the rest is history. So, Danny,
I,
your parents were also Sabras, or did they come
no, no. By the way,
free?
just to finish with Kuni Lemel, you know, my parents took me and my sister maybe 25 times to watch it. Can you? That was really, really so much fun and also educating in a way. You know, this really brought in the shtetl and the Haredi kind of society into mainstream Israel. That was very nice.
Where did
Very
you see
nice.
it? Was it in Tel Aviv?
Yes, Tel Aviv,
That
sure,
was okay. It
sure.
was Cinema Hot. It
Uh,
was
yes, bingo,
in the
sure,
base,
sure.
yeah, in the basement of the Camry Theater, in the basement.
Right, right, right,
Wow,
right.
wow, wow. And that was, the opening night. I have some photos. Maybe I can dig them out and show them. Our guest of honor was Prime Minister Eshkol,
Yeah.
was there. And he greeted me. And it was, it turned me overnight into a celebrity in Israel. And to this day, all these years later, wherever I go, meet Israelis, they will call me Kuni Lemel. Gadalnu alecha.
Exactly. Me too. I can say the same thing,
We
and
grew
you're
up
right.
on you.
And
So
generation,
you,
right.
your parents came
So
to Israel?
well, so no, both came, one legally and one illegally. My mother came in 1938 from Poland, and I, well, she's no longer with us, unfortunately, and my father also died, Alehem Shalom. But she came in a ship called Galilea, coming out of Trieste from Poland. They did the whole thing. It's a whole saga here because my grandfather, her father, he was a traveling salesman in metals throughout Europe. And one day in 38, I think just before or after the Crystal Nacht, probably before, he was walking the streets of Vienna, downtown Vienna, and then he saw this a group of Hitlerjugend, you know, the Hitler Youth, uh, grabbing two Jews who just walked on the street, and they just made them spit on each other, pull their beards, they ridiculed them in the most, you know, obscene way. He was distraught. He went back to Warsaw, where my mother's family was, and he told my grandmother, "We are leaving. We're going to Eretz Israel." Okay, well, there was a problem. Who was in Eretz Israel? It was the British occupation, they call it now, the British occupation or the British mandate. And my mother was one of five siblings. She was the youngest. The two elder sisters were over 16. And the British, when they gave these certificates, these visas for families to come, you know, it was also a process, but they barred those who were over 16. Over the 16 were not allowed to come in. So my grandmother, she didn't want to leave them. And my grandfather made her do that. And he said, "Don't worry, we'll go with the three kids. When I am in Palestine, I'll make sure that, you know, we'll take care of it and we'll bring her." Of course, he never managed to do that. And my grandmother lived to be 106. At some point, she lived with us for like 7 years. I grew up actually in her hands, and she never ever smiled, you know. And she was, I mean, it's a Jewish story, you know, one of many. Sophie's Choice,
Uh,
if you remember that
of
movie.
course, of
Yes.
course. And your father, who I knew,
But
great,
yeah,
great,
but
great
my
gentleman,
mother,
great gentleman.
thank you. My mother, she of course joined the Haganah and the Israeli army. She was in the siege in Jerusalem, and she was wounded. And I remember she told me that because she was wounded and got some, how do you call it, some privileges, she and my father, after they got married, they were able to buy one of the first refrigerators in Israel. My father, he was born in Algeria. And he came in 1947 because in Algeria, he joined what is called the Mossad Le'aliyah Bet. And they were actually bringing Jews illegally. I mean, illegally because of the British. They just brought Jews to Israel under the surveillance and the inspection of the British army. And what they did was on the shores of Algeria, they were, you know, they were posing as if they were making some Boy Scouts camps, like summer camps for children who came from Morocco, you know, nearby Morocco. And every night, he told me, there would be ships coming in, you know, boats, and then they would put the, you know, boys and girls there, and the boats would take them into the high seas where the ships were waiting. After a while, he said, "Well, I'm not going to just stay behind." He jumped on one of those boats, and he came without any papers, without anything, joined the Haganah. He was in the Golani Brigade in the war, and they got married, and the rest is history.
You know, it's like history repeats itself over and over. Our people, the Jewish people, until 1948, we had no choice. We were always under the protection, quote unquote, of others. We couldn't defend ourselves. But slowly, after 48, such similar stories of how we were able to bring our people back together to our homeland. And the story you just told me sounds so familiar to the recently the documentary that was made about the diving club that was established in Sudan to rescue the Ethiopian Jews. They discovered, it's a wonderful documentary based on a true story of creating a divers club, so to speak, uh, to bring the Ethiopian Jews who walked
Exactly.
for weeks to get there, and then boats would take them from there, rubber boats, to an Israeli ship and bring them to Israel. Uh, what you're telling me happened with your fathers. It's you know.
Already important step.
Uh, I want to quote something to you that you once said and get your reaction, because you have been over these last years one of the finest spokesmen and representatives of Israel in the social media that is now so important in this world. What's been happening since uh, Steve Jobs invented that little this little thing here, this thing that revolutionized the world and brought people together
See,
like never before in history.
can't leave home without it. Yeah.
And
See.
you were once quoted as saying, I'm going to quote you now, but since I need my glasses too, quote, "We must brand Israel as a democratic Western society, productive and technologically advanced, one that contributes to the world and help solve the major challenges facing humankind. Israeli democracy in general, and its political system in particular, are the best tools with which to showcase our brand." Basically, what you're, the saying, "Or lagoim," we are a light unto the nations, and you're doing this so brilliantly with your videos that I'm sure many have seen already, the the truth about Israel. Can you tell us a little bit about the organization and how it came about?
Sure. So when I left government, I was looking for something to do. And of course, to put the bread and butter, I had to go back to work. This is a business. But for the neshuma, I decided to do something that I had experience in, and that was introducing Israel. It's describing Israel to those who do not know her, and certainly to defend her against all the libels and really blood libels and lies and defamations. So since I was in government many years, I saw what was lacking in the bureaucracy. You know, the bureaucracy is too heavy. It's too late to respond. Budgets are always the problems, and sometimes, you know, inner fighting between ministries. So Israel was always too late, doing too little, and that meant the Palestinians, you know, our enemies and their collaborators, they framed the debate, and we were always reacting. And I said, well, that cannot be, you know. So I thought, well, we need to instead of react, we have to be proactive. Number one. Secondly, we have to have a message. You know, part of our problem, and we are a great democracy, I would say more democracy than democracy in many, many ways. And this is something that we are very proud of, but it is a detriment to the Hasbara. Why? Because in good Hasbara, in good, let's say, PR, you need to have a message, and the message has to be repeated and repeated and repeated. Palestinians have a very short message, you know, and they repeat it all the time. We are the occupiers. We are apartheid state. We took their land, and you know, it's very, you know, easy to somebody who doesn't know anything to understand. And we did not have any message. And why is it? Because of the pluralistic society we live in. You know, we have a coalition government. So a coalition government, you know, it has too many parties. So there is no one message from the government. You see, an Israeli prime minister has to worry about his ministers, that many of them do not work for him or at his pleasure, but want to replace him. So from the same government, you'll have different messages. Like you had Bennett of Yamina with a total different message than we would have now from, let's say, Benny Gantz or something like that. And then you have the opposition with totally different message. And then you have very biting press. And then you have all this, the civil societies, and we have, you know, many organizations that criticize Israel. Now we are very much, you know, we are used to being self-criticizing ourselves, and because it's distilling, it's helpful, it's also help you to correct. But this is not happening on the other side. So somebody who doesn't know anything, and he sees a quick and short message, concise, coming from the other side, and Israel, all kinds of messages, which, you know, it's hard to sometimes to decipher and to make sense out of it. So we are losing right there. And unfortunately, and I'm saying it mainly to our European allies, I mean, they should have known most than anybody what is a democracy and pluralism. And instead of encouraging that and understanding, they actually take advantage, or they use our democratic conduct against us with these messages. So I said, okay, we have to have a message, a short message, which is keeps repeating itself all the time. And then the last thing I was thinking was, okay, how to be effective? And social media just came about, you know, where everybody's in social media, especially the younger generation. I said, okay, so I have to bring all this, the three principles that I was thinking about. First is to be proactive. Secondly, short and repeated message. And thirdly, quick dissemination, social media. And this is how I came up with the truth about Israel. And the message, which I thought is very, very clear. The land of Israel belongs to the people of Israel, as the people of Israel belongs to the land of Israel, full stop. No explanation, nothing else. Nobody asks from a French guy to explain why is he French and why you know, he lives in a French land. So I thought we should be like all other countries. You know, the British Empire, during their, you know, days of the empire, they had a very, very simple rule in foreign policy. It was never complain, never explain. So I was thinking, you know, we should not be able to explain ourselves, because once you're in a position of explanation, you know, it puts you in kind of a disadvantage. So we have to be very proud of who we are, why we are here, why we have always been here. You know, I always, you know, in one of the messages, I said, why are Jews called Jews? Because they're from Judea, right here. Arabs are called Arabs because they're from Arabia. And things like that, which are simple and logical and were overlooked because we never thought of one simple message. Now, I also made sure, Mike, not to be political at all. You know, I do not take a penny from the government, so nobody will tell me that I'm serving as a government. I wanted to be very objective, very, I would say, kind of grassroots, you know, authentic Israeli voice, and no more and no less. So, as I said, the message is clear. Using it, I mean, to be proactive. And one of the examples of being proactive, maybe I will send it to you to show to all your many friends and viewers the truth about refugees. You know, when they talked about refugees in the Middle East, everybody talked about Arab refugees, now Palestinians. They don't even know that there were more Jewish refugees coming out or thrown out of Arab countries around us than Arab refugees that had to leave the land as a result of the war.
In addition to the topics discussed in our first two videos, the subject of refugees is one of the core issues for understanding the Israel-Palestinian conflict. Who are the refugees? Why, more than 60 years later, is this still an issue? Let's look at the facts. So, how did it all begin? In May 1948, the local Arab population was joined by 7 Arab countries in a collective attempt to destroy the newly re-established Jewish state. Encouraged by Arab leaders who promised they would return as victors, and later on, as a result of their failed war efforts, an estimated 500,000 Arabs fled to neighboring Arab territories. But is this the full picture? I'd like you to take a look at the refugees in these photos. Many people assume they are Arab refugees, fleeing Israel. But in fact, they are innocent Jewish refugees forced out of Arab countries. This map tells the full story. There were far more Jewish refugees than Arab refugees. Over 850,000 Jews from ancient Jewish communities predating Islam and the Arab occupation of the Middle East were forced out of their homes. Jews were stripped of their citizenship in many countries, and their property was confiscated. In contrast, 160,000 Arabs accepted Israel's offer to remain, and today there are more than 1 million Israeli Arab citizens with full equal rights living in Israel. Now, here is a question. Have you heard of any Jewish refugee camps? I didn't think so. The Jewish refugees were immediately welcomed and absorbed by Israel or by other nations. Then why, after more than 60 years, are the Arab Palestinian refugees still not welcomed and absorbed among their own brethren? And how could their numbers have grown from 500,000 to 4.7 million? The sad reality is that the Arab refugees never had a chance. Attempts at resettlement were blocked by a variety of discriminatory laws enacted in Arab countries, such as a ban on receiving citizenship, with the exception of Jordan, blocking them from entering many professions, restrictions on owning land, restrictions on movement, and a denial of education and health services. Sir Alexander Galloway, a former director of the UN Refugee Agency in Jordan, gave the reason for this discrimination. Quote, "The Arab nations do not want to solve the Arab refugee problem. They want to keep it as an open sore, as a weapon against Israel." Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser explained the effect of this weapon, aimed at overwhelming Israel demographically, with generations of refugees cultivated to hate. Quote, "If the refugees return to Israel, Israel will cease to exist." And what role did the United Nations play? Sadly, they were less than helpful. While all refugees in the world are assisted by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, a separate agency, UNRWA, was established specifically for the Palestinians. Why can't the Palestinian refugees share an agency with the refugees of Bosnia, Congo, or Darfur, to name a few? The answer is because while the United Nations Central Refugee Agency helps refugees resettle, the United Nations Palestinian Refugee Agency helps perpetuate their status by applying unique criteria. For example, refugees lose their status after receiving citizenship from a recognized country. Palestinian refugees do not. Refugees cannot transmit their status from generation to generation. Palestinian refugees can. Refugees are encouraged to resettle in other countries or integrate in their host countries. UNRWA avoids such policies. The United Nations spends on a single Palestinian refugee almost 3 times more than on a non-Palestinian refugee, and employs over 30 times the staff. The bottom line is, throughout the 20th century, the UN found durable solutions for tens of millions of refugees, while the Palestinian Refugee Agency has found, well, none. Some people may suggest this is hypocrisy. Let me share something personal. My father's family was forced out of Algeria. They and another 600,000 Jews from Arab states resettled in Israel. History has proven that resettlement and integration helped tens of millions of refugees during the 20th century reclaim their lives. However, the Palestinian refugees are trapped between Arab leaders unwilling to accept their brothers and UN agencies who do not apply equal and universal principles to all refugees. Is this just?
But now I'm going to quote you something else you said. You also said the real obstacle to peace is Palestinian rejection of Israel and the self-determination of the Jewish people. So my $64,000 question to you is, how do we overcome that?
Well, at this point, and this is after very elaborate thinking, it's very simple. We do it by just sheer grit and stamina and standing strong and being able to defend ourselves. And Mike, you were so right to say the difference today, our generation from the last 2,000 years, 100 generations of Jews who were, subjugated to pogroms and of course the Holocaust, is that we have our own land. So by having our own land, we can defend ourselves by ourselves. And we have offered the Palestinians so much and, compromises and concessions, but they would not take it. Why do they not take it? Because more than they want to build a Palestinian state, something which has never been in existence in history, more than they want a Palestinian state, they want to ruin and destroy the Jewish state. And you can see it by their conduct. And I'm not talking about just the leaders of Hamas and Islamic Jihad who say outright, we want to destroy you. The PLO, supposedly the Palestinian Authority, supposedly they want peace. They say they want peace. Abbas, Abu Mazen say he wants peace, but we have to judge him by what he does. And as long as it teaches their children from, first grade on, that we are occupiers, that we took their land, and the entire land is Palestine, and they should always be back, not just to Judea and Samaria, aka the West Bank, but also to Tel Aviv and to Haifa. And so how can you deal with that? And this is what they grow with. And the fact that they try to, again, to defame and to isolate us in the international community with all their condemnation resolutions, which is also ridiculous. And of course, terrorism. That they are still paying to terrorists to kill Jews. And this is in the Palestinian Authority. Abu Mazen, not Hamas, which of course is killing Jews whenever they can. But I've checked there, and always, they say that knowledge is in the details, right? Devil's in the details. If you look at the legislation, the codex of laws of the Palestinian Authority, they have specific law which gives money to those who kill Jews. It's very, just very, very simply put. And not only that, the most abhorring thing is that there is a tariff. So the more Jews a Palestinian kills, the more money he will get. And if he is killed in the action, his family will get it. So when you see all these things and you see how they try to isolate us and they see how they never come to the table, then I must say they're not ready for peace. And they're not ready for peace because of obstructive and leadership, and this leadership has failed them successively, in the last 100 of years. They could have had their own state if they really wanted it. Back in 1937, this was the first partition plan. It was not with, didn't come with Trump's deal of the century, which also is a partition. It came back in 1937. The Jews accepted, they rejected. Back in 1947, we, and even though we were just cutting our, more than half of our land, we said, okay, for peace, we'll do it. They didn't do it because for them, it was all or nothing. So as long as they keep teaching their children all or nothing, there will not be peace. So we will have to be strong and defend ourselves and always be ahead of the curve, ahead of our enemies in terms of technology, in terms of strategic powers, in terms of the economy, in terms of our culture, in terms of our morality. Also, it's very, very important, Jewish morality. So as long as we do that, at some point, I hope there will be a Palestinian leader, maybe he was not born yet, that will realize that mutual recognition, that peaceful coexistence, historical reconciliation is better for them, not just for us. And until that moment, we just have to stand strong.
Danny, 3 years ago, I was fortunate to direct my first feature film, Azimut. And that's the message that we brought, along as well. It's the story of an Egyptian and an Israeli soldier at the end of the Six-Day War who happened to meet in the desert, just the two of them, and they have a choice, either to keep, the war is over, either to keep fighting or to find a way to compromise and try and live together and save themselves and survive together. And that, it's, we always say that history repeats itself, but people have a short memories. What you were just saying, most people, if you ask them, they think that this problem started, 3 years ago or 4 years ago. It's been going on for generations, and it goes all the way back. And what was it, Abba Eben's famous sentence that the Palestinians never fail to lose an opportunity.
Right. They never missed an opportunity to miss an
opportunity. From your mouth to God's ears, I certainly hope that to me, the key, as you said, is leadership. And unfortunately, not just in the Middle East, but it's happening worldwide today. We used to, not just leaders, but I remember as a child, we had something called statesmen, not just, leaders or diplomats, but we had, a Churchill. That was beyond just being a leader. It was statesmanship, and we don't have that anymore. It's turned into what can I do more for myself than for my people, and that's unfortunate. And I don't know. What I'm so grateful for, Danny, though, is what you have been doing and continue to do to promote Israel's image, because we have so many people that just, there's a Yiddish word, faginen, lo mefargenim. It's hard to translate, but
I don't think there is any word like that in any other language. Lefargen, right?
Lefargen, which comes from Israel, but it's been Hebraicized. But it basically means they won't let us live, And it's that old sickness called anti-Semitism, which has morphed supposedly into anti-Zionism, but it's the same old sickness. And until that sickness is eliminated, like it's a kind of coronavirus. It's a virus that's existed for generations, and it's just morphed into something that is supposedly anti-Israel, but it's anti-us. And just let us survive. We all just want to raise our kids and our grandkids. And like Golda said, I think that was a famous line, when our Arab neighbors love their children more than they hate us, we will have peace. And someday it'll happen. Danny, thank you so much for joining me. It's your friendship means so much to me, and both Siona and I love you, and just stay safe. And I hope pretty soon I'll be able to get on a plane and come and have a Shabbat meal with you, and we'll go to the beach together. You still have you still have that bathing suit, by the way, that you said?
No, I think I grew out of it a little bit.
Well, we'll get the new one.
Yes, that was a real treat. Thank you. It's really great to see you, even though it's through this digital means, but we really miss you in Siona, and we're waiting for you here. I
Yeah,
hope
you
you
know,
can make it
I
even later.
I decided, you know, because we are so isolated, and I have so many friends from so many different walks of life, I decided, you know, why not get together with my friends the way we normally would, and do it virtually, and just talk and have a schmooze, which is the greatest pleasure for me. So, thank you, and I want to thank all you people who have tuned in and are watching us, and all my friends out there. Please join us again, and see you next time.
Thank you, and you stay safe also.
Thank you.
Bye
Shalom,
bye.
everybody. Bye.